You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Volante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Volante with Peter Bauer. We got the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and we are sitting together in the fantastic track and field town, great university town, Eugene, Oregon. Peter, great to see you, and welcome to the show, directly onto the show, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Welcome to Warbling Creek Studios, studio in my house. Last time we were together here, I don't know, it was about halfway back through the show, episode 70-something. I think maybe about 2 years ago. We've been at this show for a while. We're friends, we're co-workers, and we connect on this pretty cool podcast that we've been working on for a while here. So happy to have you actually in person and not just through the screens, but sitting on a couch.
Yeah.
And relaxing and hanging out. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, well,
welcome.
It's great. It's great, folks, to talk to Peter directly, and for the show, been at the show for almost 4 years as far as recording, talking to artists, and the show officially being released and out in places. Over 3.5 years, 167 episodes at present, 46,000 downloads, and so like really looking at, and we've been talking about this, like the energy around art and around what we're doing, in particular on the podcast as a project, as a arts organizing project, maybe arts incubator, not maybe, arts incubator, and thinking about art and maybe looking at putting resources into art. But shit, at the heart of this show is excellent artist guests. So it's a really exciting thing to do. And top 10% podcasts in the world, and we're just like doing what we should do in this format, I think.
Yeah, that was a cool text message that you sent me a couple weeks ago, and we got that Spotify Wrapped year in review, and it was interesting to see some of the reach of the show and the way that it's grown, and particularly the number of countries that the show is streamed and listened in. We've had a number of international guests over the life of the show so far. So it's really neat to see it's beyond just, us here in the rainy Pacific Northwest, but there's actually a global community of guests and listeners for the show.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at indigenous guests on the show, we've had over 20 nations of indigenous guests.
That's right.
And guests from Greece, Turkey, Ireland, Scotland, Britain, Canada, a few guests from Canada.
That's right.
And from some of the First Nations in Canada. So that's a piece that I really like. And I saw the weird stat that we're fifth most popular arts podcast in Denmark.
Okay.
So every once in a while you get subject to these email updates that are just, that they fascinate me to no end. But we can club around and just, get to that top spot in Denmark, which is one of our beloved countries as well. I have some Danish heritage in my background.
Yeah,
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, my great-great-grandfather was Hans Peter Hansen.
Hans Peter Hansen.
Yeah, so that's where Peter comes from.
Yeah.
He's
Many stories.
Yeah.
Many stories about Hans Peter.
Yeah, from Copenhagen.
But starting the year out hot with Black Belt Eagle Scout, first podcast in 2023, and been trying to get Black Belt Eagle Scout on the show for a while, and it's going to happen. And she's incredible, and you hear some of her music on Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, other movies, but she's got a new album and world tour coming out.
That's right.
She's also local, Pacific Northwest. So I don't know. I know when I mentioned that one to you, Black Belt Eagle Scout, I mentioned to other people, it's like super exciting if you're down with Black Belt Eagle Scout.
It's very good.
It's a great one. Recently having Sharon Nova, who is a My Brightest Diamond, her music project, but she does a lot of stuff as far as composing, singing,
right.
being part of ensembles. For popular music, some folks would have encountered her in the Decemberist work, Hazards of Love,
That's right.
and the live tour, which I explained to Shara on this show. Is like one of the unique questions to be able to ask is, how is it that you sing in such a way that I get goosebumps? Like, what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
physiologically for that to occur, or to talk to somebody who produces that effect.
Yeah, and that experience, I had the pleasure of seeing that show with my wife when they came through Eugene. They performed at McDonald Theater, and certainly some of her passages were, some of the emotional high notes of that first act or that first set that they put on. And in our own family, it's funny, that album specifically is known to my children as the Scary Forest music.
Yeah,
Because when we drive from Eugene to Bend or Eugene to the coast and we have to go through the forest and the mountain ranges, we tend to lose cell service.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the standby albums that's either on CD in our car or that live version. We picked it up on vinyl a year or so ago when it came out. But they have this almost averse reaction to it because of that power that you're talking about, that ability to
there's
sort of sonically
singing from the
evoke
woods.
something.
Somebody singing from the woods at me. They probably look like the woods in Oregon. I'm driving through Scary Forest music. Yeah, there's like a Scary Forest music core scene, right? That would like dropping it. That's a good description. Hey, from the mouth of babes, right?
That's right.
That's about as accurate a description of that you can get. But so anyways, with the show going into the new year, I have a lot of big goals as far as one of the ways to measure podcasts the way that they're done and RSS feeds happen is downloads, which I don't know, in modern era won't tell you about the quality of the philosophy in the show, or it won't tell you everything about the show, but is a tangible indicator that something's happening and people are listening. It's the measure. So one of the things thinking about is getting to where we're moving towards 50,000 at the end of 2023 to double that number. And look at a six-figure 100,000 for having a big goal, but also being an independent podcast.
That's right.
You and I plugging in together, put in the hours that we do, but with others too, as like an arts community. And we've always taken the podcast seriously, but I think there's a way that you do anything, and when you're creating something, is where you dream bigger and you say, what exactly is stopping us from, connecting with these artists or having a festival or producing a label? I mean, we've done print. There's a podcast scene, issue number 2, all indigenous, coming out at the beginning of 23. So we think about print and we think about video and just thinking expansively. I mean, if you're into arts and if you're not thinking expansively,
Yeah, there's certainly, I feel, just in the way that we talk about it, a momentum around this show. And when I think about those different opportunities that we have to engage with each other around this, some of the cross collaboration, maybe in promoting a show or talking about a show, some of the things that are created around that have a very organic and fun feel. And I think that's part of the indie thing that we're doing here. This is very much, you and I doing it for fun, because these are the questions that are intriguing and really the guests that are interesting, not just to us, but maybe in a broader conversation about, what art is. And
what the hell are we doing in life?
What are we doing here?
What do we? Well, I think there's a particular thing, even like recording it in a certain format, like the street cast with Death Valley Girls.
That was fun.
Like, I mean, I know you and I were tripping on that, like great energy. Like at that time, I felt, anytime you work on something, it feels like labor at times because you're working. And I was really looking for like kind of kinetic energy, like at the end of the summer, being like, what is, let's tap into a live performance, or let's tap into talking to somebody before they go on stage. So speaking with Bonnie Bloomgarden and Sammy before that show was fun because it wasn't all the, it's being like, we're popping on the show, like, what's cool? Where are we standing?
Yeah.
Like
there's an immediacy to it.
Yeah, we just bullshit. And then, they were so great live inside and just really just took a bootleg recording. And I just feel the energy even listening to that episode with them because it's like, as an individual participant in a show, I just can go back and experience that in a very particular, very discreet and unique way because we recorded and made the damn thing, right?
That's right.
Otherwise, it's a great experience.
And it's that, I think that's part of the momentum is that participation in, not just the interview, but then seeing friends at a show, checking out a gallery opening, watching a screening. There's all these ways that connection is built and continues to spread. And I think that's the arts organizing piece that you were talking about. And I know you and I both spend a lot of time thinking about the connection we have. Each time a show comes out, potentially that's going to a new community of listeners.
Yeah.
And we have so many interesting subgenres, within our show. Of course, there's the indigenous piece that you mentioned.
Some baseball.
The metal scene.
A little.
We have
get that metal there.
Painters.
Burlesque dancers.
Filmmakers.
Yes.
Opera.
Yeah.
So we're introducing a lot of interesting ideas to a lot of folks that I think probably have more in common than they recognize. And, and then we have a longer form philosophy episode dropped in there, just to keep it fresh,
keep it honest,
keep it back to our roots, right?
Keep it honest, keep the Academy happy, right?
Yeah, but this is so interesting, the way that this show has grown, the types of people who listen to the show, the places that they're from, and then the way that we interact with the art and the artist after the show happens, I think is kind of freeing up how I think about this show and just the way that, each episode in some ways is a time capsule, right? For some guests, it might be their first interview.
Sure.
And that's really interesting. For other guests, it might be the longest interview they gave of the year, right? At 30 or 45
And
minutes
every
or
once
an
in a
hour.
while, somebody like during an interview will be like, what's up with this fucking podcast? I mean, like it could be anything. It could be anybody have whatever experience they have with it. So
Yeah. And just the way that it moves through time, there's sort of an evergreen nature, I think, to the questions and the creative process. But it's certainly been exciting to watch some of the folks that we've had on as guests continue to accelerate in their respective fields.
it's really exciting because I get excited. I mean, there's part of an enthusiasm to the show that I think on the outside you could say, well, I mean, I do get excited about all these things, but I think, it might on the outside be like, you're excited about all this, all this type of stuff. And I am because of the curiosity, but I really like to see and advocate in a certain way for the artists themselves. Seeing like Mitra Mitchell, who we've had on the show, who ever since I first saw her painting, I really think I look at Mitra Mitchell and say, mention her name in places around the world and people would know the reference type of level of art. And then just seeing her get, in the gallery and really be seen, and just hearing just yesterday, she has a funded 1-year project within painting that uses live actors and uses elements of theater with the painting. This was just this morning, but just seeing around that, because that excites me and excites, seeing what somebody's like, it's fun to hit it. It's fun to get that thing. It's fun to have that song that people are singing. It's fun to be that painting where people are looking and be like, how the fuck did you do that? It's a great, and seeing that and being around that in the sense of community is exciting. It's something to celebrate. And the show's connected to it in the sense of part of the community, right?
Yeah, there's such a cool mix, I think, in the different types of guests that we have. Particularly folks that are maybe just starting out or you can see that they're about to break, or about to be exposed to a much wider audience because the quality of the the whatever it is they're producing is so, next level, but maybe not, doesn't have the reach yet or hasn't been exposed to the right, conglomeration of an audience to really spread.
Well, I think there's something within in doing the show too, is like there's these accessibility to the questions. Like the questions are the net. Like you being an artist and a creator is like the net to bring folks in, so you can bring a wide assemblage of people because of that, because you're asking a question around creativity. But I think what's best about that is the remarkable and varied answers you get, particularly when we're dealing with some polymaths on the show who are, obviously super talented and have delved into the big questions we asked in different fields, whether it be architecture, music, design, fashion. I mean, they have gone deep into that. And you get different answers, right? I mean, earlier, before we get on, you had mentioned things about, I think it was from the Brian Eno cards, mechanized, the idiosyncrasy. I was talking about when things develop, or they're a revolution, or there's cool art, or there are movements, it's deep idiosyncrasy. It's deep flashiness or being conspicuous. That is not an extension of the norm. It's not an extension of what you've seen before. So you take notice of that. And I think on the show, whether it's like music or personal display or how people want to boldly present themselves, that's the shit we're down for.
Yeah.
Like that's the criteria.
And then there's also, there's the folks that are, maybe at a more emergent part of their career, and then some really exciting people who are well established, that we've been able to come in contact and interact with, which has been really exciting. Like I'm thinking of the Kitty Craft episode.
Yeah. Pam Valfer.
Really exciting.
Yeah, that's why I was talking about architecture and learning a lot about museums and space. And, you never know. Yeah. You never know what you're going to run into. You never know who the podcast saint of the show was been in the secret election. Vizia Dakini in a secret ballot that had only, I think, 8 or 9 electors, but 142 votes for Vizia. So there's some irregularities there, but overwhelmingly the patron saint. And the voice of the show from Dublin, Rachel Lally, going to be having her and poet artist Jeff Finan on Instagram Live. So we're doing Instagram Live.
Okay.
Vanessa Stockard, beloved artist from Australia, and I refer to them as the Irish, the primarily the Irish folks that I know through the show. So we're gonna have them on Instagram Live. But there's a piece to the show that I know, whether it's because of time or how we present the show and how accessible that it is, there's something about the vulnerability for myself or for the show or, of being live that I want to jump into so people can be like, I want to ask Vanessa a goofy question. I want to ask her about cats. And, I want to hear a poetry performance from Dublin. I want to see these type of things. So I think it'll add this wide array. And if you think about the component that you've been encouraging, Peter, around video, little behind on production of that, but in the near term, video podcast with Blair Borax.
That's right. She did a live performance.
The live performance there. And recently an upcoming show in the new year, Rebecca Mills from New York, a very talented visual artist. So basically more ways to use some of the energy that's out there.
And just recognizing the different ways that folks access the show.
Yeah.
The different channels, the way that they can connect to it. I know certainly for podcasts that I listen to, I enjoy, seeing little YouTube clips where it's maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And I end up watching enough of those, and I think, oh, I should just listen to this whole episode. Here I am
There's
piecemealing
an
it.
intimacy that's nice.
But being able to, I appreciate sort of the longer nature of this show and how we can range a little more. But it is also nice to pull out little ideas or moments that really stand out. And I think the live performance, particularly for our, singer-songwriter types, is really exciting.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed it, for our visual artists, brings another dimension to the conversation. And it's one thing for me to picture, an artist's studio. It's another for them to turn and hold up, to the camera. Like, but it's this blue. Do you understand?
Make it easy for me. Like I think about that a lot, and I know I tried to do it even just recently, and I had mentioned talking about Rebecca Mills, and just who's a visual artist, and you have to see her outer space depictions. You have to see, the sea, mermaids, but just trying to facilitate ways to come into contact with the art. And actually, there's a whole bunch of the show, like as serious as the questions are. I mean, there's something goofy about asking super serious questions to people you don't know that well. There's something like really strange about that experience. But I've always felt at the heart of it is just like it establishes a connection. And for me, I think there's an absurdity to it all. I think there's a great fun absurdity in art of asking, what are you doing as an artist, or like asking those type of questions. And maybe a disruptive element to just kind of, as you ask those serious questions, you realize you're laughing, you realize there's some joke, some absurdity, and at the essence, probably am I having fun creating this stuff?
Right.
Like, am I enjoying my life creating and performing? And if not, like, maybe what adjustments do I want to make? If I ask myself, why am I doing this? Because some guy out in Oregon, some show out in Oregon asked, like, why do you create art? And I really started to think about that. That could help. Like, in the sense of being like, that prompted me to realize that I wanted to sculpt rather than do what I was doing. So you don't know where it's going to go. I think that's pretty open-ended.
Yeah. Well, how else? So we talked about the zine. We talked about Instagram Live. Talked about the video component. What other ways are coming up in 2023 that listeners and maybe guests have a way to interact and participate?
Yeah. Another great idea from Peter. Peter is an idea generator and editor and producer of the show. Working on a Patreon as a system that I have personally on Patreon, directly supported artists. Mark Palm, a guest we've had on, who I love Mark Palm, probably one of the biggest Mark Palm fans out there, Mark J. Palm. He supporting his art, getting things in the mail that are zines and sketches, getting content in photography or songs or early content. So being around that and seeing what Patreon does, there's a component of the show that we've been talking about, you and I, Peter, of generating funds and money and contributions to support the making and expansion of the show.
Yes.
Because it is worthy for those things. But even thinking really big idea when it comes to offering more or having special, honestly, art treats for those who support the Patreon. But creating things like art grants. Since the show does reach internationally, and we bring folks in from many different communities around the world, how is it that we find, in terms of a micro grant, the 19-year-old young artist, who's able to get, requests to us or grant requests to us that, maybe the art wouldn't happen without it. And us, thinking smaller amounts, but something that gets the supplies, that gets the canvas, that gets the basic equipment that's needed and helps to generate that art. And I think when it comes to the show and the community around it and the idea of investing in arts, I think that's exciting. And I think that's expansionist in the way of thinking about what art can do, because if I keep going and interviewing and we keep working on this, and one of the big things that I'm trying to figure out is how we use art to help heal, to grow, to have a better perspective, to be ourselves. That's kind of like the foundational aspects of society.
Yeah, seems to certainly be a recurring theme in our show.
Yeah.
Is people talking about, art as healing, both for self and for others. And yeah, this idea that we can sort of as a community start developing emerging artists globally, I think is a really exciting idea or thought. And immediately makes me want to think about doing like a short interview before they start a project, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, let's see the wrap up. Like, what was
thing?
the short film that you were able to produce? What was the how did the opening go?
Yeah.
What did the demo sound like?
If you had twice the amount of money, what you would have you done that you kind of ran into as far as a material type of piece, or things, just thinking about it.
And to me, that's the most exciting part about thinking about sort of the community within and around the show, is not just exposing each other to new ideas and perspectives and points of view, but actually investing in each other to further develop the really cool things that are,
that
bubbling, that want to happen, that there are, maybe some nominal barriers that are preventing something great from being started.
Yeah.
And so it's that, for me personally, that sense of wonder, what could be, what will be.
Well, and
exciting.
the roots of my thinking in creating the show, I've mentioned Amanda Palmer's book, The Art of Asking, which is, I mentioned it to a lot of people as being deeply influential of doing and asking folks to do things, asking them to go on to an interview, asking them about their art. And I think that's a huge way to think about what you can do, because you can ask the question and somebody says yes to an idea that you thought was outlandish and they wish to connect with, then it starts to become real. And I think that was the piece in Amanda Palmer that was most important, like being bold and saying, I'd like to do this. And the question not asked conundrum, right? The question not asked is never answered, where you can at least learn by saying, hey, would you like to do this? No, I don't know you. I don't know you. And these are strange questions. And I don't know what a podcast is, or hell's to the yeah.
And we don't have to mention them by name, but I'm always excited when we get a firm no from someone's publicist.
I love firm
it
no's.
Makes me think, well, maybe the publicist.
There's too much mystery. There's too much mystery in the world. Yeses and firm no's.
Yeah. So and that's something that we've talked about too, is sort of almost as a tenant going after rejection and seeking it and
rejection
examining
therapy.
it, being surprised when there's a yes.
I worry. There's one piece about it, because of my part of my habit. I think if I explained to you, is like after I make an invite, I erase that I made the invite, because I don't want to come in contact with it and have my mind be like, why haven't they gotten back to me? I'd rather just do it. It's important to send out, but it's not important for me to chase or think about. So to any guests out there who haven't been on the show but do listen, that I've invited 2 or 3 times,
apologies for
that. That is the primary and only reason I think you would have been multiple. I would not see the last message I sent.
Coming back around, who'd be a good guest.
Hey, you've asked me before, and I'm still afraid of getting on a microphone. But no, it's just kind of like that. Always asking, right? Like, and there's when you study philosophy, or you got with your mind, Peter, thinking about the big questions. Big questions can be annoying, and they could throw you off a little bit. Or I know I've asked folks what is art, and they've waited a long time for somebody to listen to them.
Right.
For 5 minutes, 5 seconds, 10 minutes. And that's cool. Like that's cool to be like heard and be able to riff on something and be like, shit. Oh, now I know why I'm doing it, because you said it or you thought it as you were saying it.
Yeah. Just creating that space to analyze and examine and interrogate some of those maybe bigger questions that don't make it into a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah.
And just the way that sort of the format of the show allows for bigger thoughts and for thoughts.
Well, I don't want the 15 to 30-second soundbite for our audio clip, but yeah.
I mean, they're in there.
They're in there.
And they're gold.
Yeah.
And there's a richness, I think, to this format that, if it suits you, can be rewarding.
Well, it's interesting, I think, like, because I follow industry news on podcasting. It's interesting to produce something in, what feels like, as far as investments in it growing and ad revenue, all those indicators, economic indicators, it's hugely expansionist in the sense of money being put into it in advertising and accessibility. I mean, I think if you look at the accessibility, you and I putting together this podcast, and honestly, in general, from what I've seen, being catered to in customer service from our distributors, podcast vehicles, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Pandora, all the places you can find this show, is that they put a lot of customer service into somebody producing content for free that is of good quality. And that allows you to get it out there. It allows you to get it to, to that larger audience. So, so there's a lot of resources, a lot of thinking. There's a lot of jokes about podcasts, any new form, right? You listen to podcasts. Some podcasts are super annoying. Like, I mean, it's like people putting themselves on microphone. If you don't like somebody, then you don't know why they're riffing on this, but they're riffing on this because of this. And
there can be a very, it's a range, right? But sometimes it can feel very much like a local cable access channel. And maybe that's where we fit into that. I don't know. I have such fond memories of that in college and undergrad.
Well, we love those things.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot of channels. We had like the free channels, which were the ones that sell you knives and coins and home goods.
Yeah.
And then the C-SPAN channels.
Well, you bring up these things like the cable footage stuff. With the found footage channel on YouTube. Unfortunately, there's a rise in counterculture that I've become in contact with in the Pacific Northwest around VHS and the lost and found media and madcap performances at 11:30 in Bristol, Rhode Island, cable access, 1987. There's some treasures in these places.
Yeah.
And there's some catalogers.
Yeah. I don't know. So maybe there's a connection for me for, as a child, always wanting to be on, wondering what it would be like to be on cable access.
Do a magic show.
Who's this guy doing their weekly magic show
in the shock
every
jock.
Sunday at 10:30 and thinking like, this is just a guy. This is a person who's maybe at work somewhere right now.
Yeah.
Sitting behind a desk.
I'll just go up there. I'll get it. I'll put in the proposal. I'll get my own Baba Booey, right? And I'll just roll from there. I mean, well, that's so. Anyways, but within the industry, just talking about the industry, it's it's growing a whole bunch, and this and that's happening. There's investments. There's conglomeratization. I don't know what that, right? That's a big word. That word, the big one when they all squish together. But there's bad trends and good trends, right? It's a accessible format in a concentrated capitalist, possibly late capitalist model, which will give us our royal podcasts and our Obama podcasts. God bless them all, and other people trying to, whether it's whatever they wish to say or what they want to do. But it is an accessible. It's an accessible field right now, and you can't say that a lot for a lot of places.
That's right.
I think that's what's cool about. I think that's what's cool about podcasting. There is that democratic element, and that you can produce something and see if it sinks or swims
Absolutely.
out there. So,
And there's also the in the pandemic
oh my
sort
gosh,
of crystallized this. We were already there on a rudimentary level,
Yeah.
but the ability to eliminate geographic space as a barrier to access, both for the listener, but especially for the guest,
yeah,
makes it a very exciting time to be working in this format specifically because you're not limited to who's in your town, right, or who's coming through your town. But the
Yeah, the
way that we
local
can
radio.
think about the interests of us as sort of producers of the show, but also the interests of the listeners, and the various different ways that takes shape.
yeah. Well, I think with the pandemic, we were able to continue to do the show. I look at because most of the shows were produced in pandemic times, and you can hear it within the show. I mean, I don't know what the it is. I think that there was a pandemic going on, that there were questions about, the pandemic or what pandemic's doing to art, or the fact that you couldn't perform, over time, and just really just being able to continue to produce through that, because I think you might not have been able to produce for that because of physical limitations of what you're trying to create, or the fact that you were ill in a pandemic, or the fact that the outcroppings of that pandemic affected you mentally, or the COVID itself.
Right.
There's a lot of fallout that we're still seeing, but a lot of the show being produced within that, and then seeing it kind of transition back out. But it's interesting because the show landed big guests early on, in my head. You know what I mean? Though we were learning a ton of stuff as we were going along at the beginning, we had a big artist from the UK for the first show, Hannah Hull, doing incredibly intellectually challenging projects. We had Anya Khan early on. We had Vanessa Stockard, early on. So we came at it, and I think we were strutting the strut a little bit, as far as having the big guests, but definitely finding our footing. And then the pandemic being what do you do? Everybody was asking what to do at the beginning of that. I don't know. I was am I going to die? Are we going to die? How long is this going to go on? Everybody going to lose their job? What the hell is going to go on? And then it's no, we can still create through this, and
Right.
just
and the
keep
technology
the thread going.
around that
The
creation.
technology, which has improved, and we use Zencaster now, as you know, high quality video, high quality audio, WAV files, an integrated experience, and just where the tools we're using and the work that you do in production are just, we can produce something pretty cool, we think.
Yeah, especially from a home studio. I remember when I was first getting into playing in bands and recording in probably 2004, 2005. I sort of sketched out what I hoped to achieve as far as microphones and gear and what I could afford.
Yeah.
And in the 17 years since then, 18 years, the bar to accessibility is so much lower to have the tools to produce something that's interesting. But the tools and the technology is one thing, but it's sort of the spice of the show. It's the flavor, it's the feel, it's the vibe. That's the magic to me, right? So
Yeah, that's
tools and technology are helpful, but there's something cool about these questions and these guests and these listeners that the combination of that, at least this year, has felt different than the past 2 years we've been doing the show.
Yeah. So everybody, Peter has a very fascinating background. He has a lot of skills that he brings to the show. It's an educator and editing and producing the show. Incredible ear, musician himself, drums and guitar. You play bass too, right? You said?
Yeah.
Bass. So he play all those things. But one of the pieces is that Peter's hands are, your hands are on each show, and you help even on with some of the live performances, making those live performances sound the best
Yeah.
in the work that you do. And I know when we first started the show, I would have to say we both had to be at a nascent period of way of thinking about doing art big and like being the artist, because you were thinking about things with music. You've been a musician, you've done a lot of things, you painted, you've done a lot of artistic expression, you've been an artist. But at the point in starting the show where I'm like, hey, I want to start this podcast, you're just kind of loopy enough, and I knew that already, be like, yeah, I'll help you out with that, and be like, all right, now you're hooked in. And you do a lot of musical projects. So what, like, for you, Peter, like in kind of like, developing your music and some of the other projects that are very much based on sound, natural sound, mindfulness, and rock and roll separately.
Yeah.
But like, what are you edging into?
Yeah, I've tried to stay busy in the studio on a couple different projects, and I'm certainly hoping to release those in a more proper form. In 2023, we'll see how editing takes shape. The first is a project, Flaming Bison.
Flaming Bison.
Previously on the show, we'd played a track from our band Blazar. We've had a reconfiguration
Love
of
Blazar.
band members. Similar in the sense that it's, long form, free form, improvised rock and roll. But also different in the sense that we're incorporating a sample pad, a vocoder, a drum machine, and really just trying to expand sound and texture. There's definitely a video component, so maybe in the show notes I'll link to a video that we had done recently.
Yeah, you playing some live.
Yeah,
and
we played
everything.
2 shows this year. One in March at a legendary place here in Eugene. Its third incarnation, called John Henry's.
Yeah,
And that was really fun back when they opened in March. And then at Old Nick's in June, we played
big shout out to
show.
Old Nick's. We'll talk a little Old Nick's later.
Yeah. We stunt driver, our guest.
Kim Priest.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how a show came about.
Yeah, we met there. But anyways, that we practice weekly. We've been recording some stuff recently, and then we'll be looking to play some live shows in 2023. I have, just for fun, like a Wednesday night club and a standing invitation to 5 or 6 friends just to drop by on Wednesday night. And it's just to practice recording. So we start with nothing, or maybe an idea, or maybe someone that, hey, I found this riff this week. Or I found this beat, or,
Yeah.
And then we just use it as a 2-hour practice time to have fun. Take turns playing different instruments, challenging each other, producing each other. What if you did it this way? What if we tried this sound? Let's cut that in half. And so it's a really interesting process of just practicing, recording and practicing. How do you serve a song? What does it need? Does it need more guitar? I think it does. I think it needs more guitar. Or maybe it doesn't, right? Hey, what if we cut the drums out completely here? So that's a fun exercise with some people I really care
know
about.
when Peter Swinford, a friend of ours, plays, he fills in with the guitar.
Yeah. There's some
add a lot on top of.
There's some.
Mr. Swinford.
It's a very emotional, very sort of splatter painting approach where I think to the uninitiated it could be dismissed as that racket, or just noise, but perhaps there's an emotional depth to some of that Flaming Bison work. And then the last track or project that I'm really excited about, and that we'll share at the end of the show, is that project I have with a friend called High Cascade Lakes, and it grew out of my own sort of interest in recording like new age spa music, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
Spiritual ambient, drone, synth. I started, to kind of pick apart what are the sounds that are present, in that type of music. Maybe it's a flute, maybe it's sort of an angelic vocal pad. And so I have a project with a friend where we've made some guided meditations Just for friends and family, it's on Bandcamp. They're about 10 minutes. But in doing that, I was sampling nature sounds because I feel like that's a component of that type of music. And I had actually been listening to, like last spring and summer, just putting on nature sounds when I was working in the office.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll have background music, maybe.
It's Eugene, Oregon, after all.
Yeah. But I thought, I had been reading in a book around, like lifestyle and movement and, connecting and that sort of thing. And
Your environment.
that was one thing is, where I think hardwired to be in nature, and a lot of my life, the time that I'm in nature is when I'm walking to and from my car. Right. So
Nature.
Be that as it may, can I bring nature with me? And so in this meditation track, I started back in April. Anytime I'd go on a hike or camping with my family or friends, anytime we'd pass water, I'd kind of say, hey, can you go up the trail and give me 5 minutes? And I started collecting some Northwest nature sounds. And so rivers and creeks and the ocean, and just interested in the way that, the tide comes in and then you can hear the rocks and shells moving around if you're listening, right? That can you can tune that out pretty easily, if you're
soundscapes,
walking,
I've encountered artists doing soundscapes to feeling immersive, that the sounds are around you and you're in that environment in some way.
Yeah. So for me, the high Cascade Lakes between Eugene and Bend, up there in the mountains between 4,000 and 6,000 feet, are some of the most stunning and beautiful places in nature that I've encountered and have had a marked impact on me as an individual, personally and spiritually on a lot of levels. And so this project is sort of like reflecting that back. And so, long term, it's really so I can have a mix of 50, places that I've been in nature that I can listen to,
It's incredible,
in the office, but also just, there's something interesting about those textures and soundscapes, like you said, that can say, oh, this is what Yahat sounds like.
Yeah.
This is what, the beach in Coos Bay sounds like.
Yeah.
This is what, Summit Lake with the view of Diamond Peak sounds like.
Yeah.
And it's, like we were saying, that these shows can be time capsules, I think. For me, as the, sort of field recordist, it's a little memory of a trip, but also for someone else encountering it either on loop in a meditation or just listening to a longer piece. I think there's something diffusing about the sound of running water, at least for me personally, and I imagine others as well.
Yeah, it's always great to hear about those projects, and I know I'm supposed to record one, but I tell you, I hear myself, and I'll tell the listeners now, I hear myself in doing the meditation. I got to get beyond. I can get to the point where I can be a guiding, smoothing voice, but I think I'd have the beginning of it being like addressing the needs of the practitioner. Say some jagoff out there just cut you off before you came in here. Here's the principles, though. I'll put it in a nutshell before I recorded for Peter, because he asked me a year ago, listeners. With posture, you feel that there's a thread from the heavens being held by an angel, keeping your back straight and your head up. You are inhaling through your nose to the best of your ability. Your arms and hands are on your lap in some format that you're comfortable with and in the tradition. And the thoughts is the biggest thing. You're set up for posture, and the biggest thing that I've ever had help me as a mental way of detachment or disengagement with intrusive or troublesome thoughts is the snipping of the string of a balloon. So the thought is there, and you can see the thoughts as balloons, and I snip the strings in meditation. You can still look at the things that are floating away. You can still consider them. But they're floating away. And so for everybody, there's these little tricks sometimes. I find that one to be very helpful, and I do cut the thread to the thoughts through that, through physical attention. So
that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing the demo of what's sitting in the Google file now, known as Ken's track. I think we have some
Yes.
really good material to work with.
I thought I might be able to do it on one take. I was blessed to be introduced and study Buddhism at Marquette University. That's where I studied philosophy. I got a scholarship there, and I had the course opportunity to take Buddhist philosophy, which was active and practical. And you could, we actually spent 10 minutes in class at a Jesuit university engaging in mindfulness before we opened those texts, and really transformative and real blessing.
It's interesting the way that mindfulness can be presented to a person. For me, it was when I was a teacher. I was a middle school teacher for 8 years, 7th grade and 6th grade. And it was early on, so I would have been a 7th grade teacher. Prime time, adolescence, a lot of energy in middle schools. I loved it personally.
Yeah.
But we had an after-school professional development, and usually it's, some fly-by-night outfit and not very good. But in this case, it was from the Oregon Research Institute, which is near the University of Oregon, but not affiliated with it.
Okay.
And they were doing an educational study to see the impact of mindfulness training on educators for reducing stress. And they introduced us to Robert Sapolsky's book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Yeah.
The concept that in the wild, a zebra is chased by a lion, and it escapes, and it shakes hard for 90 seconds, and then it goes back to being a zebra.
Right.
But we as humans are so good at carrying that lion around with us everywhere we go for the next 10 years
For a
of our life.
long time.
Right. And so using some strategies to connect with the body, 5 things you can see, 5 things you can touch, 5 things you can hear.
Yeah.
Combine all those
Great
things.
technique.
Let's practice. But I had not, outside of that, not been exposed to meditation in any other way than, growing up in Eugene or on the West Coast. And, there's sort of it's baked in maybe ways that it's not in other parts of the country as part of maybe the West Coast.
You could feel the presentations culturally in different ways.
Yeah, and maybe that's just more of an Asian presence on the West Coast and the impact of the blending and learning from different communities. But yeah, it's interesting how mindfulness shows up for a person who's hasn't heard about it yet or hasn't listened, and so that's part of this project too. It's just like, hey, here's a track I made with a friend,
and it can
just listen,
and it can be helpful. And I think there's an important piece too. Is like, I think both of us have a streak of being snarky and cynical, but I think it's really important within mindfulness and meditation is to accept it as a good unto itself. Yes, it's being marketed. Yes, it's being packaged. Yes, everybody's doing it. Yes, I'm given meditation rather than a proper wage. Like all these things are really true, but I think it's really important to understand that fundamentally the practice, you haven't won by rejecting the not doing.
Right.
You haven't.
And then
you've
right,
lost.
It's not just for the doing of it, right, but also for the practicing of cutting those balloon threads. When you're in a higher pressure situation, having already had that neurological experience of letting go and practicing of letting go, and saying, okay, And believe me, I'm good at this on like 1 day out of 10, right?
Hey.
I'm constantly learning by my repeated failures and mistakes.
Oh, one of the peculiar things about trying to become healthier and have healthier habits with creative and breathing and all those type of things is that I've been able to implement them. And there's the startling discovery of the progress that can still yet be made. So you have to have the like proper mindset for it, because I didn't breathe properly prior to the mindset. I
Okay.
also didn't walk the amount that I wish to as a goal each day would be 8 to 10,000 steps. I didn't do those things. And now I will be engaged in many situations, don't always employ it the best way that I can. I will actively, almost automatically, go into controlling my breath through my nose. Once I learned in my reading that it's that chicken or the egg type of thing with anxiety and the breathing, right? We think that our breathing becomes messed up because we're anxious, and there's some interplay, but it's the fact that we're not breathing properly and don't have enough
Yeah.
of what we need in the ear that is making us anxious people.
So it's the way that we inhabit these spaceships, right? These biochemical processes that we're walking around in, right? This electrical sack of muscles and tendons and fat and bones and
Hey,
skin.
I wanted to talk about some. We were talking. I mentioned a couple of times Rebecca Mills' episode coming on. We were talking about a lot of that stuff, but some cool episodes coming up in the new year. As mentioned, Black Belt Eagle Scout coming hot right off at the beginning of the year. We have Brooke McCarthy, who does a one woman act, How to Be an Ethical Slut, on stage off that famous work.
Right on.
On stage, does the whole thing herself, so it's her that's there. We're gonna get a chance to talk to her, and I don't know, like, about the experience, about inhabiting that space, about why go see the show. But that's actually going to be performed out in New York City, and we got to get a chance to talk to her. We got painter Susan Carr coming on, who's just absolutely just an incredible and wild artist. And like I said, with the Instagram Live and the Indigenous Zine issue 2, and the fact that we're looking to get maybe a couple episodes a week during the month of January, to kind of keep the plate full, both with like some of the bigger artists and some of the artists like, yo, check these people out like right now, because like you'll be reading them in the New York Times, like, in 15 months.
That's
Type
right.
of thing. So that's what we're trying to serve up
Yeah.
in the new year.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this at lunch, and I want to kind of come back to some ideas, because we've also touched on them in this conversation as well. But I've been interested in thinking about questions around access to art, and been talking to a friend about who produces art, who pays for the production and distribution of that art. Do they have the same values that we have, that I have, that they have? And then there's more discussion around the term like nepo baby, right? Someone's parents in Hollywood or in film or music, perhaps appears to put them in a shorter line. And I was curious of your thoughts. We've had a lot of different artists on the show, different folks from a lot of different backgrounds, but wondered some of your initial thoughts around access to opportunity, maybe for an emerging or developing artist.
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, and it's super complicated. I don't want to say it at the beginning, because a lot of times you say a complicated question is that, but it is. But I want to maybe answer it in like a little bit of a different way. And this goes back. I'm going to look over at the poster, Hunter S. Thompson for Sheriff, and I want to talk about his style and the way he talked about ideas that fucked with him. He talked queering it up. Things would be queered by him, and so I think when things get kind of queered up and mixed up and switched around, those ideas can be radical ideas, and they can disrupt how you might view art. And a big one for me, in my reading and understanding, is really almost traditionally Marxist. I studied the writings of Marx And obviously, within the tradition of socialism, there's a lot to say about production of art, religion, reinforcement of concepts that don't serve the people, the gaggle of Catholics, the populace, the serfs, the working class. And I think those things are true. I think that's a real dynamic and a real way to explain things. I also think that if you look at, if that is so, what we've seen historically, like in the Soviet Union, in oppressive states around issues of spirituality or religion and art, which I see intermixed in this sense, it's a foolhardy effort to go to human beings and force them not to be spiritual. It's stupid. It's a lack of understanding of the way humans are and what they seek. They seek for big things. And I think art's the same dynamic when you see that the art has to now serve the state, not the bourgeois. You end up in this same type of dynamic. While I think that the values that are being reinforced are better, right? That the working man is victorious, that you can defeat fascism, that these things, ideals are great, but it's still a dictated way of engaging with things. So I think at the heart of what you're asking is an economic question. I'm very influenced. I'm very influenced by that. It's like, what do you do with Taylor Swift, right? Access questions, professional background, talent, opportunities, time. What do you do with folks who work in Hollywood as an industry and have easy access? And if we make it problematic, you and I talking here, Peter, we're bringing in our guests on our podcast, right? And we're all fighters, like everybody, like we're all fighting for time, attention, listen to our thing in our art, and it's tough. You spend a lot of time doing this, right? So, like that access question. So, do you see? So we're looking. You and I. I'm not saying what the painting looks like. You and I are looking at the painting, and I'm gonna say, Peter, what we have to do is experience this painting. And it's a great painting. It's a fantastic painting, and we just have to experience it. And we experience it for the same amount of time we're going to look at. We don't have information on who it's from. It's a unique enough piece that's been presented to us. We can't establish it to a tradition. We don't know if it's male, female, or other. We don't know any of these type of things. We know the economic class it was produced. We really don't even know the time it's that type of work. And we got to sit there and look at that fucking thing and figure out what it is. It's tough. It's tough because the way we think about art, we're trying to grapple and understand, did this person make it out of strife? Did they make it easily? Was their genius tough? Yeah,
and I think that's part of the question that's interesting to me is when examining the authenticity behind a piece or the perceived authenticity, does a person have to struggle in order for it to be an authentic piece of art? Is the struggle that you were put in a shorter line or given access to opportunity, but now you have to hold on to it? Is that struggle greater? Can you equate the two, or is that an unfair comparison because perhaps they're both challenging in ways that are incongruent?
Yeah, I'm going to avoid it one more time. I'm going to queer it up one more time. Take a look at Frances Bean Cobain, right? Kurt Cobain's daughter. A very interesting, quick study in that Kurt Cobain didn't come from the type of things that we talked about. He didn't want those things, and maybe in the narrative, that's his death. Everything that was created around him was too big for him, couldn't deal with it. I don't know. Like, we have theories about that. But there's a massive amount of wealth which was not given to Courtney Love.
Right.
And was given to her. And I think if you look at Frances Bean's art, I think it's tremendous. I love her art. I think it's fantastic. But you're also looking at a trajectory which is very unique and gets to the core of the question that we have here. If there's a propensity for Frances Bean to become an artist, what's in her way?
Sure.
Kind of nothing. I mean, money, access, exhibition space, name, tragedy, tragic backstory. celebrity.
But it seemed like there's a dialogue out there that somehow that experience is cheapened, or it's not fair, or
What's the difference between her and her dad? It's the question in itself.
Right.
Her dad was the scruffy punk world
From
figure
Aberdeen.
from Aberdeen, for fuck's sake, and that's not where she's from. So I would say this in honesty. I always know and I always have thoughts about how somebody was able to do their thing. Like, I do. I look at it because of the way that I think about things. I would also say that I think I actively discard a lot of that, in that I find myself, my personal reaction to art to be more immediately taken over by the thing rather than the other stuff.
The experience.
Right. Now, if that thing is the greatest thing I ever saw, and it came from a black woman who came out of the city who, and at 45 she started painting and produced that greatest thing ever, I think the way that we look at that thing and say, that's even better. Even better and so even bigger.
It's that intuitive underdog nature that we carry with us. Well, here's an additional wrinkle that I want to layer on this one more time before we let go of this thought. You talked about the way that art reinforced religious belief and has across culture, right? If we look at cave paintings, right, those are religious traditions. And then the way that perhaps that gets morphed by the state, where the state, is reinforcing a message. And by extension, in modern times, I would say also the way that corporations, produce types of families, types of shows, types of movies. This is what Christmas looks like. This is what your holiday classic should be. My question to you, in thinking about who controls the means of production and distribution, is what happens when more and more art is AI generated, be it in stock art that we put in our PowerPoint presentations, in the way that a band could have AI put together their show poster. That's my sort of next question beyond like the inherent nepotism that we're talking about that exists beyond field. I want to zoom in more on the way that AI is designed, produced, or programmed, and then some of the inherent bias or limiting factors that come into that once we're interacting with
I'm messed up on this
being.
Yeah, I'm messed up on this issue because my first inkling, my first motivation is towards not technology divorced from any consequence, but I could not be more fascinated by something than I am by AI. And the idea of it, and thinking of what's produced in engagement and authentic human experience or creation of art. What I've heard about the AI stuff that's produced now, generally, and I don't have a strong opinion, but what I've read about it is that there are a lot of images, that there are a lot of human created things that form the churn of the AI. So I think, in the way of talking about it, you have to talk about it properly. I don't know if there's a pure AI, but if we're talking about creation that is not perceived to be pulling in from the labors of the humans who are producing the things, then we can have a different conversation. But now the AI is generating from the hands of the humans and in an anonymous fashion that you don't know the fingers who created it. And in music, too, another fascinating area where not only can it be produced, but the AI can also think about it for you. Not only is it a production type of thing, but it's the thinking of what should be produced or what would be appealing. So
just as we're having this conversation, I'm imagining what an AI guest would be like. So if there's a listener out there who has a connection to a great AI that we could interview or talk to, I think we could maybe cut right to the core of some of these questions.
Didn't have a core episode for it, but I tinkered with it, and I'm going to try to find it. Her name was, this sounds like the beginning of a good blues song, Peter. You get the guitar out. Her name was Kiko, I believe. It was the AI.
Okay.
And I'll have to pull that up again because as soon as I saw that was an AI, I would answer any questions that you would ask them. All
right.
What are we up to? What's the universe doing? Please help.
Yeah. This will be an interesting thought to come back to in future years as these technologies continue to develop. I spent, probably an hour and a half with my brother and wife a couple months ago. He had access to some app, I think is called Dali or something like that. And we were just stringing together words to see what came up. One of my favorite productions that it made, it was clairvoyant parakeet with watercolor.
Wow.
That's how we describe pastel watercolor.
Gotcha.
And I'll be damned if it didn't come up with the clairvoyant parakeet.
And there it was.
So it was this fun exchange, but just thinking of the ways that production and distribution is there are already levers on those. Once AI enters into it, I think that's another level cog to examine.
There's a podcast. There's a podcast. It's called it's A-I-M-E-E. Amy is the name of the AI, and the AI is the podcast host and interviews guests from a universe of superheroes that is created just for the show. They're not recognizable superheroes. So it's an insular universe, gossip, trashy, AI, celebrity talk show.
Okay.
It exists. So
I love to hear you say it exists. That's the my wife and I have a saying, like if you can say it out loud and then Google it, it's probably a thing.
Yeah.
We were going through a bunch of photos, for prints around the holidays for Grandma and Grandpa and stuff. And it's like, I would love to get this picture as a tree air freshener and hang it in my friend's car.
Yes.
I wish there was a way to do that.
Yes.
She's like, wait, search it right now. I bet it is.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there's like 3 sites where you can upload your image. Of course you can. Of course you can. But it's just, of course, there's a show where an AI is interviewing other AI superheroes from this insular, trashy universe, so we can get that celebrity gossip. Of course,
you don't even know why it's. What's interesting is such a radical jump. You don't even know why the shit's saucy. I mean, you can mention Kanye, all right? This is gonna be saucy, right? Like you don't even know why the moth woman dating Superbug is scandalous. I don't. Maybe a few shows in, I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying.
Of course it is.
You dropped in.
Yeah, I love that.
So big 2023, looking to double listeners, looking to print video, Instagram Live for that kinetic energy, like we said.
When's that zine coming out?
That zine, thank you. The zines have been late in production, largely due to work schedules and such. But the zine, issue 2, is almost ready to be printed, and you can very much expect the all-indigenous issue, zine number 2, in January 2023. We will email it to you if you like as a PDF format. We also mailed them for free when we placed them on the shelves, which we've done at Quimby's bookstore in Chicago. Lovely bookstore, lovely zine supporter. Any of the proceeds that come in from that go to the issue we've talked a lot about of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits, which the show has delved into with its Indigenous guests. So, the small proceeds coming from any sold zine would go to that cause. But yes, regular zine issue number 2, and after that there'll actually be another zine issue 3, probably in February or March. So starting 2023, starting it hot.
Love it. And you and I both talk a lot about visualization, picturing the future. And I just want to verbalize back to you something I heard you say on the show. And you mentioned it at the top too, but that's the idea around a something rather than nothing festival.
Yeah.
So that's in its genesis. It's a seedling of an idea.
It's 2024. Look, one of the cool things is, and then you think about it in a way and talk about it, or maybe talk about it more. I live in Albany, Oregon, not too far from Salem, Oregon, and I talk to bookstore owners. I talk to musicians. I think that I spend my money, time on this podcast. I think it's worthwhile. That's why I would talk about it. If I'm doing something that's not worthwhile, I wouldn't be doing it. And I also wouldn't be talking about it. So that's like that organizing piece of talking to musicians, like in a place like, why isn't there a good musical outlet here? Who hasn't organized, like pulling together some people? How come they're not authors here, but thinking about literary, painting, fundamentally transforming the mind, or having experiences where you encounter art that help you heal, like that physical healing arts. We've talked about this from the very beginning, and I see it, and I think we talk about it and connect with our guests and supporters. I think Patreon has a part of that in thinking about for finances and the Patreon. Given one of the things I want to say about that too is that the show has been free and a lot of things sent out free, but I also think that when artists do things, it's important for me and my artists that I work with to say that there's money attached to
That's right.
the time and to the thing that we're creating, because there is value. And
That's right.
I think that the ideas of generating new artists, of being able to access things you like from the show and artists that you like to access, put a few bucks down, put it in the tip jar. We're busking.
Yeah, but I appreciate the inherent value. And as a person that's, played a number of shows in my life, there's a difference between a show that you play for free and a show that's $5 at the door and a show that's $10 at the door, and name your price.
Investing in it.
And I really connect with that idea that it's, not just us as the producers and the expenses associated with the show, but it's also getting other folks off the ground, putting together in-person events, building a community. There's a real connection there that is exciting for me and really taps into that organizer that's inherently in me of wanting to introduce people and connect people. And to me, that's the excitement of the show and the excitement of this, the potential of what we're doing with the zine, with the Instagram Live, with the video components, thinking about a show, having the Patreon. It's really exciting, and I'm very much looking forward to the momentum that 2023 is going to continue to accelerate.
Yeah, and I think even too, just folks know, you've seen podcast looks to invest in commission art. Heather Dean produced a piece for us with the claw machine pulling up the microphone. Mark J. Palm, who's been featured in Mad Magazine, does a lot of great creations, including the Fang. He's doing commission art for us. We've had Greg and Fake, who do the Santos Sisters, put the podcast in one of their panels just by collaborating and asking. We'll have an ad in issue number 3 of the Santos Sisters, best independent comic out there. So like just showing up and saying, hey, like we're for real, like we're doing things. We've always said that, and being idiosyncratic and showy about it for whatever is part of our entertainment piece of this. Because I think what's important is that both of us, while we engage with the art the way that we do with the guests, we also envision ourselves being up at the mic, being the MC, or in the background, handling sound productions or producing or whatever. I think we both see ourselves in role of the creation and the participation with art. So it isn't, so it's immersive in that sense. And that's the part where I think that part comes from you and comes from us, is to like, you like doing this shit, you like listening to this music, you like paintings like that. Amen. Let's rock and roll together. Let's not give a shit,
Yeah.
And if you can't do it within arts, man, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yes.
In the studio. Thanks for
Love
being
you,
here.
Gene.
It's a typical gray and rainy day.
I got my sun lamp at home
Yeah.
to tell me that the sun
Got back from
still
vacation in a
exists.
sunny place, and I think my tan will last about 48 more hours until I'm back to my pasty winter self. And that's just fine, too. I appreciated the vitamin
Well,
D.
and the thing is, for the heat and the heat and such, I know in Australia, we'll be talking to Vanessa Stockard soon. It's summer there too, so if we need little blasts of different type of energy, we do have to circle the globe.
We got to reach globally. Awesome. Thanks for hanging out in Warbling Creek. Thanks for coming down to Eugene. I will start cueing some music now, and that'll be a segue into some high cascade
Thanks,
links.
everybody. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate you.
Yeah. All right.
Take a comfortable seat on a chair or cushion, or you can lie down on a bed, couch, or floor. You can also do this meditation outdoors, sitting or lying directly on the ground. If you are in a sitting position, keep both feet flat on the floor or ground. Take a deep breath in and know that you are breathing in. Exhale and know that you are breathing out. Let's take one more deep breath in. Breathing in, I know that I am breathing in. And then a full exhale. Breathing out, I know that I am breathing out. Now let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Take a moment to feel whatever is supporting your body. If your feet are in the grass, you may want to wiggle your toes and notice what the grass and ground feel like. If you're lying down outside, feel the sensations of the earth in all of the places that your body is in contact with the ground. If you're sitting or lying down inside, feel the solidity of the floor or furniture beneath you. If you're not directly on the ground, take a moment to realize that whatever it is supporting your body right now is being supported by the earth. However your body is positioned, feel that the earth rises up to meet your body, to hold it and carry it. You may also want to imagine that your body is sending roots back down into the earth. Become aware of what you feel in your body at all of the places that are in contact with the solidity of the earth. You may want to take a moment now to rest your hands on the ground. Breathing in, I know that I am connected to the earth. Breathing out, I know that the earth is connected to me. We'll take a few minutes of quiet breaths like this. What is this connection between our body and the earth? Imagine that there are no barriers between you and the earth. Let all boundaries fall away. Feel the energy that passes back and forth between you and the earth. Notice that this happens all by itself. There is no separation between our physical bodies and the earth. Every day of your life, the earth has been supporting you. Where do you feel gratitude for the earth? Maybe you're grateful for the earth's solidity and stability, or its cycles and seasons, or its rivers, lakes, streams, and oceans, or its trees and mountains, maybe its deserts and plains. As we close, I invite you to imagine that you have everything you need to feel that you are connected to the earth and the earth is connected to you. Breathing in, I know that I am connected to the earth. Breathing out, I know that the earth is connected to me.